Welcome to Graffiti Topics Off the Top, where I discuss topics from the graffiti world right off the top of my head. And as always, if there's anything that you guys want me to talk about, just drop it in a comment. But let's get into topic 1. Graffiti motivations, trauma. If you were to ask me what percentage of graffiti writers are carrying around some trauma, I would have to say more than 50%. And trauma absolutely played a direct role in me getting involved in graffiti. I plan on talking about abuse being a similar motivator for graffiti writers at a later date. But by the time I started writing at 12 years old, I can say I'd suffered a fair amount of abuse, and especially I'd incurred a fair amount of trauma. Maybe a week or two before becoming a graffiti writer, I almost lost my life. I had my arm up against a glass window and that thing broke out and sliced me all to hell and just barely missed slicing my neck and taking me out. This happened to me when I was at home, and I can say in those years, I was looking for any excuse to just be outside and be away from my house. This was especially the case when my father was in the house. My father was a war veteran, and he was a hardcore alcoholic. And my father took out a lot of his stress on us, and there'd just be some days we'd wake up, he'd wake up, and he'd just start swinging on us for no reason. So by a very early age, I'm talking maybe 7 or 8 years old, I was already outside, going to Holly Court, just kind of wandering around the streets, riding a bike, riding a skateboard, and doing everything I could to not be at home. And having my life almost get taken from me amplified this greatly. And now I had one of the best excuses to be outside that I could ever find. And that was, I was going out to crush buses, to hit the streets, and get up. And even when we do a pretty good job of suppressing things, of pushing things down and not thinking about them, they don't go away, and your body remembers, and your body tells you to do certain things at certain times. And mine was always telling me to get the hell out of the house and go out there and go get up. And the sad thing is that the streets were not any more safe than my house was. They were a hell of a lot more dangerous. And I was risking going outside and incurring some more trauma every single day that I went outside. But I was pulled to be outside with my friends, going out and bombing. And during the time that I was writing, I was also incurring more trauma. I almost lost my life again. I got chased by a bunch of people, and I got snaked by people I was very cool with. And each one of these things just made me want to just distance myself even further from those things happening, go outside and go bomb. And that's because it was one of the only things, if not the only thing in my life at that time that filled that void I was carrying around from having so much damn trauma. Trauma is an incredibly broad subject, and I can't really do it justice in a couple of minutes, so I'm definitely going to speak on this some more down the line. And this is especially important because ultimately, trauma was the thing that led me to stop tagging. But before I get into that, let's get into topic 2. Graffiti and parents. In 2025, it's probably not uncommon for there to be some writers out there who have parents that used to tag themselves. I've seen that before, and I was convinced for a short amount of time that somebody I knew was out there tagging with their son. But I'm thinking maybe when this topic got suggested, they were wondering about how to hide tagging from your parents or just my relationship with my mom when I was active. When it comes to hiding tagging from your parents, one of the easiest things you could do to hide your activity is not take any pictures of what you're doing and not post them on social media. I almost guarantee if you do these things, you will get busted by your parents at some point. And I gotta figure that they're gonna have some reason to look at your phone, and if they look at your phone and find all that stuff, it might be over for you as a writer. And when it comes to how I hid graffiti from my mom, I can say my mom was raising 2 kids by herself with absolutely no help. My mom worked for DPW, she was a street cleaner, and she was incredibly tired and very drained every day that she came home from work. And unless I gave my mom a reason to look into what I was doing, she just assumed I was up to all good instead of no good. And because I kept my markers and all my cans concealed, and I had a plausible backstory for why I knew all these writers and had all these tags on my backpack and on notebooks, my mom just never looked into it any further. The day when all my friends got busted for tagging in 8th grade definitely would have been one of these things, and had that happened to me as well, it probably would have been over for me before it ever really started. But to be real with you guys, the last thing I want to do is help you deceive your parents. And in my case, I had absolutely no relationship with my father when I was writing, but even if you guys have a not good relationship, I don't want to get in the middle of that and make it worse. And this is especially the case if your parents show you a lot of love and they take care of you and they have you on the right track in life and they created an environment and they've given you the support to succeed in life. And no matter what your socioeconomic background is, no matter if you come from poverty or not, you might be drawn to the streets regardless. And the best thing you can do is just be open with your parents about who you are. This might lead to them taking your supplies and just keeping a very stern watch over everything you do, but I do have to say this is a sign of a parent who cares about you. And as annoying as it might be to not be able to go out at all times of the day and go out and tag and go out and be with your friends, you want your parents to care, and you grew up to be a very screwed up person if you have non-caring parents. And I remember a writer that I used to see do a lot of really reckless and a lot of hot stuff on purpose in the late 90s. I'd be like, damn, this fool's a sav. Like, he does a lot of stuff that's incredibly hot, and he doesn't seem to care about any of the consequences. He seems to accept them wholeheartedly. And the dude BP that I talked about in my last episode was one of this guy's best friends. And I remember talking to BP one day about this dude and being like, damn, this fool's a sav. He's able to go out there and be out all night hitting up. And BP told me, yeah, that's because this dude's mom doesn't give a crap about where he is or where he's going. And I was like, man, I wish my mom was like that. I wish she just let me go out and just hit the streets. And he said, no, you don't. Be glad that your mom gives a crap. And this dude would probably stop what he was doing and drop all this hot behavior and all this reckless stuff if his mom just simply gave a crap about him being alive. Parental relationships can be incredibly complicated, and just like with trauma, I'm definitely going to revisit this topic in a later episode. But let's get into topic 3. Annoying toy stuff. Asking hella questions. Back in the day when I was like a 13-year-old on AOL, I used to do this one especially. And the homeboy Josh D, who used to run the Hi-Fi Art website and who now runs the Rebel A clothing line, used to get asked hella questions by me almost anytime he got on the internet. I was very obsessed with graffiti and I was a very curious person, so I always had a gang of questions to ask this dude. And it got to the point where he had to tell me, Connor, you're a cool dude, but can you stop blasting me with questions as soon as I jump on the internet? Like, I'm down to chop it up with you, you're cool as hell, but please stop doing this. And I did. I had to learn that you couldn't just run up on fools and just ask them hella stuff and expect them to answer even one question. And the fact that this fool Josh D used to show love, he used to make time and just chop it up with me as a young graffiti writer is something I still value to this day. And I remember who I was very well at that age, and I've always been open to questions. People can hit me up and really just ask me anything, mostly because of how I was as a teen. And I definitely identify with some of the young toy fools who hit me up and blast me with hella questions as well. But sometimes I get the impression that these fools are hitting me up, not to get some answers, not to glean some information from somebody that's been around, but more than anything, it's to get some acknowledgement and get some attention. And I can tell that this is the case when somebody's asked me 9 or 10 questions over the span of a couple of days, and they keep having more questions, and they don't really address the answers that they're given. And people lock themselves into these parasocial type of relationships every day, and this is especially the case for youngsters. But for anybody that this segment is resonating with a little heavy, and they feel a little guilty about it, I can just tell you, limit your questions. And there's a lot of answers that you can get for yourself by just doing your own research, doing your own homework, and just living life. But if you are one of these types of people that asks hella questions to random dudes on the internet and expects answers, I can just suggest one thing. And that is, when you get your answers from this person, just support them. If they have things for sale, buy them. If they're going to be doing live shows, if they're going to be doing Q&As, buy a ticket and go support. But especially what you shouldn't do is find reasons to suddenly hate this person and not support him anymore once one of your questions goes unanswered. But with that said, if you have some questions, especially if you have hella questions to ask me, drop them in the comments because that's what this show is all about. But let's get into topic 4. Always keeping a scriber. If you ran into me in 1997 or 1998 and you check my pockets, you're always going to find one thing, and that was a scriber. Scribers are one of the most versatile tools that a graffiti writer could ever use. And there wasn't anywhere I was ever going without carrying one. And this is especially the case because I primarily hit buses. And most of the time when I go out and bus hop, I usually had a couple of people with me. In like 96, 97, this would be the homeboy E, this would be the homeboy Prayer, this would be some of the guys from HTS. And in like late 97, early 98, this would be the homeboy K, the homeboy W, and the homeboy Sins. But I found Scribers to especially be valuable when I was out there bus hopping by myself. Sometimes I wasn't even bus hopping. I could just simply be going to school. And having that little Scriber on me, being able to just put my arm up against the window and slowly hit up without any marker sent, without any big movements, was just too damn valuable to me to not carry one. And as I've also talked about on TikTok, Scribers were the easiest graffiti implement for me to get my hands on. I could just go to a hardware store outside the Mission District and cop one, and while the dude might look at me kind of weird for copying something like this, I could get one just the same. This wasn't the case for markers, this definitely wasn't the case for spray paint, and I would walk in and fools would be on me, they'd be watching me and just waiting for me to gaffle something, but I'd just come up on one of those Scribers, pay a couple of bucks, and then go hit up. And in a city like San Francisco, there's glass everywhere. And this is especially the case for the bus shelters. And anytime I was waiting for a bus and there was nobody at the shelter, or the bus was coming and nobody was paying attention, I would just catch a quick Scriber tag and be on my way. And the fact that Scriber tags ran for so much longer than just regular markers and regular paint on a bus also made me always want to keep one in my pocket. And really just walking around the city, riding the bus around the city, if I didn't have a Scriber on me, I'd want to slap myself for being so forgetful. And just really when nothing else was possible, when you really didn't have too much of an opportunity to do your thing, where there's too many people, too many potential heroes, that little Scriber made the difference between getting up and not. And if somebody were to ask me what graffiti implement should a tagger keep on themselves at all times, if it ain't a streaker, I would say a Scriber. And if you keep both of these things on you at all times, you're not really going to find too many surfaces you can't tag on.